when I see your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and stars that you set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, and a son of man that you care for him? Yet you invite us to open ourselves to communion with you. In accordance with your promise, your final words in the Gospel of Matthew, I am with you, always, until the end of the age.
God is with us every day. It is not only a spiritual closeness, it's a physical, concrete, real presence. Over history, miracles have happened with the Eucharist at the center. Several years ago, all the Eucharistic miracles recognized by the Church were for the first time gathered and catalogued in an exhibition. Buenos Aires, Amsterdam, Paris, Valencia. 2,000 years of history, 2,000 years of presence. This exhibition on the Eucharistic miracles was devised by a child, Carlo Acutis, born in London, brought up in Milan, buried in Assisi.
Ever since Carlo was a young child, he showed a great interest in everything that is the church, the saints, the gospel. For example, I remember when he was very young and we were passing in front of churches, he wanted to go in and greet the crucified Jesus, the tabernacle. So going there was important to him. He'd stop for quite a long time, too. I was born in a family of lay publishers. My father was not anti-church, but he was, let's say, not practicing. The sacraments of the First Communion, confirmation, and marriage, they were the only 3 times I attended Holy Mass. I always say that Carlo was a little savior for me.
Love for Jesus and the Eucharist is so strong in Carlo, even as a child, that after careful assessment by the bishop, he is allowed to receive First Communion at just 7 years of age.
We'd go towards this rise where there's this monastery on a hill. At a certain point, we had to stop because a shepherd was passing with a lamb crossing the street. And he saw that as something of a sign of predilection from the Lord, because we were taking Carlo for his First Communion. He constantly felt this living presence of Jesus, which then animated him to introduce Jesus, the love of Jesus, to many other people. For example, we have our housekeeper, Rajesh, who comes from a priestly Brahmin caste. He was really struck by Carlo's truthful, persuasive example.
Io sono Rajesh.
I'm Rajesh and I come from Mauritius. I started working with the Acutis family, with Carlo. At that time, he was very young. He was full of affection. After nursery, he started school here at the Marceline Sisters. I'd sometimes bring him, and then he asked if I could take him into the church to have a little sort of meditation by the tabernacle. I didn't know anything. I'd wonder what's going on. I could understand if he were an adult. Then he told me what's inside the body of Jesus, present in blood, soul and flesh. I said, but Carlo, how is it possible? And he would then slowly explain to me during the time I took him to school. Every day he told me the same thing. I wasn't a Christian. I come from a Hindu, a Brahmin family. And my father was a so-called Pandit, and a kind of priest. He had knowledge of of the language of Sanskrit. It's very rare, almost impossible for a Brahmin to convert. The teaching I had from Carlo, more than my father, I can say he was my spiritual master. All the actions he made struck me right in the heart. Then he said to me, the Lord lives in the heart too. Then as he started to grow up, I felt when he went to Mass and took communion, he didn't force me. Carlo explained all the importance of the Eucharist to me, how it makes people live. Because this world is full of temptation. He explained it can come in forms of clothes, sex, alcohol, TV. He said this is how the devil enters your life. And you can't face the situation alone. And so, when he started to explain to me the Word of God, the Bible, he did so with sweetness. It was as if we'd already gone up to heaven. And he told me what heaven is like, how you live, even how you live with the Lord. It was as if I'd already arrived. I was happy. Then I also had dreams about Jesus, and the Lord, and the Virgin Mary. Then I started to tell Carlo about it. I asked him, how can I have these dreams? He told me, Jesus loves you, Rajesh. Then I had myself baptized. It was 1999.
Carlo really liked Assisi, and the question many ask is, why? But you see, it's not so much the city as the man inhabiting this city, and it's Francis. Because the man of peace, the man who loves and respects creation, the man of the poor, they are the three great thirsts that youths carry within themselves. And Assisi is also loved because of its cultural value. Ultimately, the first color film kept here in this basilica was made to meet people. Because let's not forget, that story was frescoed to reach the hearts of simple people who could neither read nor write.
Mi ricordo benissimo quando Carlo è arrivato.
I clearly remember when Carlo arrived with all the family. They'd bought this house near mine. We didn't know his was a well-to-do family, but he had unique simplicity. And this child, who spoke many languages, and I didn't know, I tutored him for school with the other children. Me, just imagine. I think he was pretending when he let my grandchildren answer. Pretending not to know the answers.
I met Carlo when I was 6 years old. From that moment on, we were inseparable and spent all our summers and holidays together. He was very pleased to spend as much time as possible at Assisi, and this went on until his death in 2006, when I was 14. To show who Carlo was, we were 10, 11 years old. We'd gone for an ice cream on a very hot day. Returning home, Carlo counted the change and realized we'd been given 20 cents more. He absolutely wanted to go back and give the extra money back because it was the fruit of these people's work and sacrifice. It was wrong that we appropriated it, so he made us go through Assisi again, which is, if you know it, all uphill, to give the sum back.
I was 7 or 8 years younger. I was a child and they were already almost youths of 13, 14. Sometimes my cousins wanted to exclude me from their games in the various activities you do as children, while Carlo always opposed that kind of thing.
After a certain time, he'd go back home because he had to go and pray. No one at that age, right? That alone made me think.
This youth struck our community too, because I remember in the period when he came to Assisi, some friars said to me, "Enzo, do you know Carlo? He spends a lot of time in Eucharistic adoration." I was so about it, but no, he stunned me too, because to then discover that he used to say, people who put themselves before the sun get tanned, people who place themselves before the Eucharist become saints, well, extraordinary.
And us, living here in the center of Milan, there are often homeless people on the streets, sleeping in cardboard boxes. So he used his own money and gave people sleeping bags instead of buying toys for himself.
They'd often stop. I don't know, the vagabonds, especially in the little church here in front. And he brought them food or blankets if they were needed. That's how he was.
There was a man called Matteo. He was sleeping on the ground on cardboard and was cold. Carlo started to worry. He wouldn't sleep and he thought what he could do for the man, let's say the right word, tramp. Carlo was offended. No, Rajesh, you mustn't say tramp because they are all creatures of the Lord. Then he returned home and forced his mum, "Mum, why don't you give him a sleeping bag so he can sleep well?" And he had cooking done for him too. Every evening I accompanied Carlo. He didn't bring him leftovers from our home to eat, but fresh, just cooked food, just like we were eating. Not like if it's leftover, we'll take it to him. He didn't like that. He said, this man in difficulty should eat like we do too. And that's what his life was like.
It was as if I saw St. Francis in him.
Carlo could experience hands-on what are, unfortunately, the contradictions that currently exist in the church. That is where, for example, youths might attend catechism class and receive confirmation, but then no longer go to Mass. So he came to have this wish to present a little more historically what were episodes, miracles mainly, prodigies, signs, that the Lord has wished to give us over the centuries, where he really wanted to show that in the consecrated bread and wine, there truly, actually is his genuine live presence. Carlo used to say that we are far luckier than those living 2,000 years ago near Jesus, because those living in Jesus' times were often hindered from seeing him because of space and time. It was not easy to approach Jesus because he was surrounded by crowds. Well, we just have to go down to the closest church outside our home, and we have Jerusalem outside our house. Carlo was amazed how today you can stand in line for kilometers to go and see a rock singer or an actor or a football match, and then there are no such lines before the tabernacle. Carlo said that living this very Eucharistic dimension already places you in co-eternity. That is, you already enter the dimension of God's time, kairos, as theologians call it. That is, this time of God, this time where you are, in a certain sense, already in the Trinitarian dimension. And Carlo was in fact aware that the Eucharist, if taken in good faith, of course, transforms you. Every time you receive the Eucharist, Carlo said, every time you take communion, you're no longer the same person because Jesus works transformations inside you. So even if you don't realize it, he increasingly tries to transform you and make you become like him.
For Carlo, the Eucharistic Miracles exhibition isn't just a pastime, and it's more than a youthful passion. It's a heartfelt mission of evangelization. It's actually something for which Carlo studies in university books and texts in English that he buys himself so as to master the tools of the web.
Every time I went to clean Carlo's room, he was there with his computer. He was researching. There were pages about, he was writing. I said to him, Carlo, what are you doing? It's a lot of work. You should rest. He replied, not now. I don't have time to rest. As well as school lessons, I worry about the world. He made the exhibition panels. He did all the research. He said, if we present how Jesus is present in the Eucharist, they will know Jesus. They have to see what happened, the tale, all the miracles, then the Lord truly comes. Otherwise, people are lost. This is my work, my duty.
Bear in mind that there wasn't all this internet everywhere when he started this exhibition. And he involved us too. We had to make journeys to take the photos, which he considered very important because people need to see signs, see photos, see paintings. A lot of people became promoters of this exhibition, so we really could touch all the world. And many people bore witness to us that they came closer to God and discovered the importance of the Eucharist. Carlo had understood this great mystery and tried to communicate it to others. He tried to make people understand it, because of course, what is the greatest love one can have for others? It is wishing for their eternal salvation, that's it, as well as the earthly help one can give, but laymen give it too, non-believers give it too, but mainly it is helping them reach what is eternal bliss.
During my first years of teaching, Carlo was actually one of my students. And to tell you the truth, I'm very honored about this at this point of history. The nicest thing really is how Carlo related to his companions, to his classmates. And he had some good friendships with girls, and that's exactly how it should be in the second year of high school. I had been teaching bioethics, and therefore I had involved my students on the meaning and the value of life. When the topic of abortion came up, whether it was right or wrong, I remember him right there at the end of the room. He had very clear ideas about this because there was the disquisition, from what point can we talk of a child of human life? And so on. And with almost disarming naturalness and simplicity, he said, it's clear that it's from the moment in which it was conceived, from when the egg cell and the sperm meet.
This is the generation which unfortunately lives these means of communication explosively. But it's also the generation that mostly suffers because of the demonic attacks these means of communication can bring. For example, pornography, the use of drugs, which is so widespread and cheap, or bullying, which generates extreme situations like suicides. With a click, you can practically enter hell, and no one protects these children. So Carlo can teach us because he has experienced all these dangers, but has managed to dominate these means of communication. That is, he has learned to be master of and not subject to these means.
Carlo was a driving force in the class. He invited all his classmates to stop at the canteen, to eat together, and then, right on the school grounds, to shoot a video for the contest, You'll Be the Volunteer.
No, lei guardi nella videocamera. 3, 2, 1, via.
In Christus Vivit, the final document of the Synod on Young People, Pope Francis wished to dedicate a chapter to Carlo, in which he practically presents Carlo to all the youths worldwide as a model due to the way he used means of communication.
Around April, May, when we were taking stock of the volunteer activities, he himself became available, saying, "During the summer, I'll work on a website for the school to put forward for the volunteer activity." And he did so. He worked on these things. We thought of presenting his work on the 4th of October 2006, but unfortunately those were the very days when he fell ill.
After he died, I found a video on his computer in which, 2 months before dying, he says, "When I'll weigh 70 kilos, I'm predestined to die." He was struck by leukemia M3, the most devastating, the fulminating one. In 3 days, he was practically gone. He lived through his illness serenely because shortly before dying, Carlo said, "I die serene because I have not wasted even a minute of my life in things God does not like." At the funeral, I noted the presence of many immigrants, many people coming from afar, so people who could be Muslims, Hindu, Buddhist, even some with a Sikh turban. He worked the first miracles on the day of the funeral, where there were so many people who asked him for help, because he already enjoyed this reputation. The church was so full that many had to remain outside. It seemed more like a party than a funeral, but yes, I think it was a party because Carlo ended up in heaven immediately, as he asked the Lord. "I offer my suffering for the Pope and the Church because I don't want to go to purgatory, but go straight to heaven."
After his death, I felt his closeness on many occasions. For example, before every university exam, even subconsciously, Carlo came to mind. I never failed an exam at university, so I don't know if it's my ability or his nearness. I'd like to think it's a combination of the two things.
He managed to give hope to various people I knew who had problems.
You know, when something gets to me or I feel down, especially during the pandemic, the one we had before, I always say, "What'll we do now, Carlo? Help me, eh?" And he has always helped me.
After Carlo's death, I don't feel I am alone. He always said to me, "Life is short here. If you're a good person, if you lead a good life, you'll always live in eternity in heaven." And I always kept that in my mind. But really, life can change afterwards. That's how it is.
In 2013, the miracle taken into consideration for the cause of beatification occurred in Brazil.
A miracle is called for because we say that it is the sign of God for the cause underway, both for beatification and canonization. So it is God who confirms, yes. And this happened in Brazil to a child, a small child, who was suffering terribly from a malformation of the pancreas. This caused continued infections, vomiting, poor digestion, and he was often hospitalized. His family, his parents were desperate. A priest, a friend of the family who had heard of Carlo, suggested praying to God for intercession by Carlo. And so they did. They invented a novena, and sometime later, the great surprise. the wonder for everyone. The child's pancreas was in perfect health. It took 2 years for the Vatican's medical team to prove that it really was a miracle. That is, could not be explained by medical science. And so Carlo became blessed, also due to this miracle occurring in Brazil, where Carlo Acutis is so loved. When he became venerable, our bishop asked the family for the possibility of moving him to one of the churches in Assisi. The family made a great gesture because it gave Carlo's body to the diocese, so this was another gesture of spoliation. It now belongs to the Universal Church, to the Diocese of Assisi. Our bishop chose the sanctuary of the spoliation because he found many points in common, points of contact. For example, Carlo loved to say, "Not me, but God." And this is rather a perfect translation of what true spoliation is. Spoliation of the ego, the self, to let God reign.
The decision to permanently expose Carlo's body came from a request by the faithful. We had exposed it on the occasion of his beatification. His tomb was then closed, also due to the pandemic, which drove me to keep the tomb closed out of prudence. But there was an explosion. Being of Vesuvian origins, I read this as a volcanic eruption. Carlo was arousing interest throughout the world.
Carlo has very deep roots in London. He was born in the heart of London, and then he was baptized in Fulham Road in a very well-known church called Our Lady of Dolor. And we discovered recently that Carlo's grandparents were married in Westminster Cathedral. So his roots are very deep in London, and there is a strong sense among Catholics, especially the young Catholics of London, that he originates here. When they look at him lying at rest in the church in Assisi, in his blue jeans and his North Sails top, you can see they're looking at him thinking, gosh, he looks like us. They find him very interesting, they find him fascinating. Of course, we know he is going to be the first millennial saint.
My life was kind of very normal. My mother would take us to church, while my dad stayed at home to look after my disabled brother. Me and my other siblings would go to church when we were younger. But then as they grew up and went to the academy, then they would stop going to Mass. So 3 became 2, 2 became 1. And to be really honest, it was my mother that made me stay with it. I didn't want my mother to have to go alone anymore. Then one day, my parish priest said that there was the beatification happening. I had no idea what a beatification was. He said the boy used the internet, from his understanding, to help the church. At the time, I was studying computer science at university in Strathclyde. I thought, okay, maybe a parish website, but other than that, what's this about? So I took the prayer card home and I searched up to find out about this young boy. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I thought, Eucharistic miracles? And then I've never heard of such a thing. What's a Eucharistic miracle? And the more I read, the more I was astonished. I read in Carlo's mother's book about the necessity, Carlo said, for daily Mass. And that same day, I got approval from my line manager. From 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock, I could be at Mass. I thought I was being moved in just the sense of technology. But what it was also doing is it was also building a solid foundation of faith for me.
Anche la preghiera è stata moltiplicata.
And prayers were multiplied too, in particular those of the mother of Valeria Valverde, a girl from Costa Rica, who was studying here in Italy. One day she ended up having to deal with a serious bicycle accident that practically smashed her head, and the doctors had almost no hope. And her mother came and spent a whole morning here at Carlo's tomb. Then the miracle happened because the girl recovered. I had the opportunity to meet her for Carlo's beatification. The miracle came from Brazil in Latin America. For his canonization, the Lord chose Latin America again with Costa Rica. This is God's plan.
This miracle happened to Valeria and her family because God placed a special friend, Carlo, to intercede for her and perform this miracle, and with his life, inspire more people to become friends of God. This also motivates each of us to see the power of prayer.
It was November 22nd, 2022. My mom suddenly fell ill. Basically, she had an aortic dissection, a tear in the main aorta, and so she was immediately taken into the operating room. Even though there was little chance, they had prepared us for the worst. I sent messages to my friends in the oratory, we started praying to Carlo, and extraordinary events happened. It was a difficult operation. It lasted 12 hours. When she woke up from the coma, she had convulsions, and so they had to intubate her again. And they believed that there was brain damage. We were hoping for a miracle. One day we received a call. They told us that my mom was being transferred. During the journey, she began to tell me about strange events. Inside the hospital, there was a male nurse always next to her in a red uniform, and a nun standing at the end of her bed with a rosary in her hands. She was later transferred to a rehabilitation center in Vibo, Valencia, and she tells me, "You know that nurse I was telling you about? He was also transferred here." She told me that she would often ask for his name, but he wouldn't answer. He would tell her, "Don't worry, I'm here and I'm always with you. I'll help you." During prayers, I still asked Carlo to give us a sign. I go to see my mother and she tells me, "I asked the nurse his name. He told me that you know it." Now she's well. We thank Carlo and God who answered our prayers.
On the very day of Carlo's funeral, a woman with breast cancer who was about to start chemotherapy prayed to him and her cancer disappeared. Carlo's fame is truly widespread on all continents. Every day we continue to receive news of a possible miracle, healing, conversion.
I went through a very difficult time in my life. I'd miscarried a little child I loved and desired with all my heart, followed by a neurological accident that came out of nowhere and left me between life and death. We no longer knew if I would ever return to a normal life, if I would ever walk normally again one day. But throughout this storm, there were two things that kept me going. The first was that our Father in heaven, cannot abandon us to death. The second was that I always felt this presence with me, a sweetness that arrived at the right moment, in a way I can't explain in words. For instance, if I can give you an example, when I was in the hospital after the death of my little child, at a moment when I was devastated, I was invited to offer my pain, my suffering, for the Pope and for the Church. So at that moment, I stopped crying and turned my head and asked, but who? Who was asking me? I didn't see anyone, but I understood that it came from this force to which I was always asking, but what's your name? And since he didn't seem to want to answer me, I called him my wonderful angel. And just like that, we arrive in 2020, 2 years later, on October 10th, 2020, at exactly 4:30 p.m. I was so tired I still couldn't walk. And so I took out my tablet to look for anything that could help me take my mind off things. But instead of finding empty things, when I opened it, I found just that look. And my body couldn't hold back all the joy, all the relief of seeing him. And I was aware I knew him. When I had the courage to click, I clicked. It was the live feed of his Beatification Mass, in an incredible moment that I couldn't understand. I just saw a reliquary being brought towards the altar, followed by 2 adults behind. So at first I thought, what's going on? What happened to you? So I started searching Carlo Acutis, but my heart was on fire. After the Mass, I was guided to an interview with Carlo's mother. She said, shortly before Carlo went to heaven, he said, I offer all my suffering for the Pope. At that moment, I stopped listening. It was as if I were back in that morning in 2018, and for the Church. I stopped the video. I fell to my knees. 9 months later, I was in Assisi for the first time. 9 months before, I couldn't walk more than a minute. I couldn't carry more than a kilo, and I had managed to make the whole trip. I was extremely happy. So, the results are that I no longer follow any therapy. I no longer have any follow-up. I have my life. Life.
Ireland in recent years has become a very wealthy country. Everyone would be happy, but we're not. And that shows you something that we all are looking for more.
Ireland, I think, used to be a strong Catholic country, but in recent years it has declined a lot, and I think there's a lot of young people out there searching.
1, 2, 3, 4.
We knew nothing about Carlo Acutis at all, but when we went over to Assisi, they said you should visit the church where Carlo's tomb is. There was an amazing sense of peace that I found, and I think for you as well, Mary Aoife, it was amazing. You know, you've been struggling a bit with anxiety and panic attacks.
You know, in Ireland sometimes here at home you're thinking, oh, I don't want to go to Mass, or I'm not in the humour today, and you know, we're all human, and you just sometimes feel, oh, you know. When we were in Assisi and we experienced Carlo Acutis' tomb and the peace, and we thought, whoa, it was like we got a little glimpse into the infinite, as Carlo always says, and we didn't want to leave. But it was that really empowered us when we came back home to Ireland. We said, we have to show our friends. We have to show the young people of Ireland.
Basically what happened was you had an idea maybe of somehow creating a space here in our home that somehow kind of replicated that peace that we felt in Assisi. Basically under our stairs where we keep all our coats and things like that, a little shrine dedicated to Blessed Carlo Acutis.
So we thought, okay, if we can try and pray as much in our little shrine, even though it's very small, if we can just ask God through our prayer to bring some of that peace into the space, maybe it's a way for other people who don't have any religion to get a little bit of a glimpse of how good God is and how there's nothing to be afraid of. And we would say to Carlo, okay, Carlo, send us somebody, whoever you like. I came out and I looked at my phone and I had a missed call, and Carlo had sent our first person. And, you know, he has sent us so many different people. People with, you know, addictions, family problems, depression, anxieties. They all come out saying, you know, while their problems don't disappear, they feel peace. It gives them hope. We didn't really understand Jesus' presence in the Eucharist before Carlo came into our lives. And I remember one time sitting down saying, you know, Jesus, are you actually there? How can I believe, you know? But through Carlo's witness and praying, you know, I slowly realised we have nothing to be afraid of. You don't have to understand, you just have to trust. And you just have to talk to him and say, this doesn't make any sense, but I just trust you and I know it's all going to be okay.
My name is Esther and I'm 15 years old. For me, it all started with this magazine. I was bored. I didn't have a cell phone back then and I was 12 years old. I was sitting on the couch and my siblings were not with me. I saw this magazine and I decided to read it. Then I read the quotes that Carlo said before he died. They really touched me. I'd never read quotes like these that really resonated with me. I can still remember some of them very well. Before his death, Carlo said, praying the rosary is the shortest ladder to ascend to heaven.
I had really tried everything to bring my daughter closer to God, but without success. I didn't know what I should do as a father. My daughter is a different age, at a different time, and how should I deal with her? Then I freaked out. I was very surprised. How was it possible? Who said this quote that was carved in your heart? This is a quote from Carlo Acutis. And who is this Carlo Acutis? Then I decided, okay, dear Carlo, I don't even know you. But I saw that this blessed Carlo Acutis can handle my children better than I could. Then I took him as a partner, and so it all began.
In East Germany, where we are today, there have always been few Catholics. The pressure of communism was very strong, and you had to be very strong inside so as not to adapt. People have always looked for role models, and so one of these models for us is now Carlo Acutis. Our family went to Assisi and brought his relic here. Then we had these beautiful posters of Carlo's exhibition of the Eucharistic miracles. Many school classes responded. In the school classes, very few are Catholic. A few are Protestant or Lutheran, and most are atheist. We currently have 8 teenagers who want to become Catholic. And perhaps This is partly due to Carlo Acutis' intercession.
Carlo made several exhibitions, including The Pleas of Our Lady, because there are many unknown apparitions, many shrines throughout the world where Our Lady has appeared, performing amazing miracles, but above all recalling the importance of prayer. Because, as she said in Fatima, with prayer you can also stop wars. Above all, the importance of praying the rosary. Carlo had been teaching catechism since he was 11 years old, and he saw that many people didn't go to Mass. They were far away from God, and he really wanted to help them because Carlo believed in the Eucharist.
Those miracles that let us know about the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. And I wanted to hold that exhibition in Nigeria. The bishop came, priest, everybody came. We were supposed to have it for like 6 months, but it's still going on since January 2023. My life has changed totally for being a devotee of Carlo. That once I receive communion now, I know that he's with me, he's lying there for the next 15 minutes. And I'm even talking to Jesus. After communion, I can't, when we're having Thanksgiving, I can't dance to the altar because I'm like, I have to carry Jesus with respect. When we receive him, he's there with us.
When Carlo was alive, I used to ask him, Carlo, why don't you ask Jesus to perform miracles in our present time? And as soon as he died on October 12th, 2006, there was the first miracle in Tixla, Mexico on October 21st, 2006. Similar to the one in Lanciano, the host became flesh that turns out to be a part of the heart. The second miracle was in Sokolka, then the one in Legnica in 2013, which was the same, with a blood type similar to that of the shroud. The host became flesh that turns out to be a part of the heart, the myocardium.
I am Father Andrzej Ziobra, parish priest of St. Jacek's Parish in Legnica. Here, a Eucharistic miracle took place on December 25th, 2013, so on Christmas Day. The Holy Communion fell to the ground. The priest took it and put it in water. But after about 10 days, it turned out that this host was partially colored red. When our bishop was informed about this, he decided to have scientific tests conducted at the departments of forensic medicine in Wrocław and Szczecin. The final results stated that in this colored part of the Holy Eucharist, fragments of a heart muscle in agony were found.
Carlo would always explain, what is the symbol of love par excellence? The heart. And what does Jesus show us in these miracles? His heart.
I didn't believe in the Eucharistic miracles at that time. At that time, I'm still with the born-again Christian. And, you know, as a born-again Christian, I don't go to the Catholic Church. But there's something lacking in my life. I became more and more depressed because I was only reading the Bible. I got to know Blessed Carlo. It's because of the sodality of Blessed Carlo Acutis, based in the Philippines. It only happened because of the COVID season that life is short. Even Blessed Carlo had a short life, but he done it fully. I went to Assisi to see him, to see his tomb. And from there, I prayed to him, and I was asking for help, and I was asking for conversion because I wanted to become a Catholic, back to the Catholic faith. Blessed Carlo has influenced my life fully, that I became back I went back to the Catholic faith.
When Carlo died and they checked his computer, they did not see him go to any nonsense websites. One of the greatest things I want for youths is whatever talent you have, how can you use it for God?
How young he was and how in charge of his faith he was, there's no excuse. You know, you could give the excuse that you're young, I'm in school, I'm surrounded by so many temptations. But Carlo too was young, and Carlo too went to school, and he did it. I've learned so much from him, and a lot of his quotes have helped me pray better. I would ask him to pray for me, and of course I would ask him for some tips and tricks too. But yeah, most of all, I would thank him for showing us that sainthood is actually a possibility for us. It gives me hope that I too can become a saint.
Suddenly we began to do the impossible, and we know that we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing if it was ourselves. Less than a year of doing our ministry, we're talking in schools to university business students about Carlo Acutis. We're talking, to celebrities and famous musicians, Oscar-nominated musicians.
One of our friends, Matt, he had a great idea of just trying to spread Carlo Acutis by leaving little prayer cards in different shops, department store by the books or something like that. So if someone's looking through books or something in a bookshop, they say, oh wow, look, there's a card of Blessed Carlo. Just trying to get people engaged, talking about it.
We created this musical in Italy. We never imagined that it could be so hugely successful.
This experience really helped me to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Through the hours spent with the other members of the cast and praying, the rehearsals were not just as any rehearsals, but moments when we allowed ourselves to be enlightened and guided by the Holy Spirit and by Carlo himself.
We were also received by the Pope.
The musical was an extraordinary occasion, which involved many young people. The musical about Carlo's life was like yeast that's fermenting the dough. The youth.
I think Blessed Carlo is succeeding in the Philippines because of the young people. In the Philippines, when you just put a relic cards on one of the churches, I tried it before and it's gone quickly because there's a lot of intercession through Blessed Carlo. That's the reason why that a lot of young kids like Blessed Carlo. Yeah, and they call him Kuya, which means big brother in the Philippines. Yeah.
One of my best friends, his name was Riker. He actually, strangely enough, got diagnosed with cancer after me in October. I learned about Carlo's beatification that October, actually. Carlo was someone that Riker found a lot of fascination with because his story resonated with him and mine too. And I eventually became cancer-free in January, but Riker continued his sickness. And just seeing how Riker looked to him as hope, it changed him in his life, and even seeing how it changed his family. Carlo just really led him to a deeper faith. He didn't just give Riker hope, just in terms of hope for him not to be sick anymore, but more of a hope of how to be content with your own suffering in the hardships of this life, but also just how to have hope in the Lord at even the darkest of times. He has this quote I was reading earlier. It's pretty simple. It's God will never abandon us. And it's true. I was so excited because I got to visit Carlo's tomb and see him face to face. And you should have seen me. I was like a kid in a candy store. I was like, oh my goodness. At first I was like, this guy's wearing jeans. But I was I got to look at Carlo, and he was I was inches away from his face, and I was like, thank you so much for just accompanying my friend.
Carlo is compassionate. He's happy. And he's not afraid of his death. He was so happy, and it's so beautiful to see. Yes, I drew this picture because it was Dad's birthday, and I just wanted to make him happy. Because for us, Carlo is a great saint. I'll show it to you.
The first thing Carlo did for me was make me smile again. It was very difficult. And then I understood that he's a specialist in difficult matters. And I remember the first time he made me smile in front of a mirror, I didn't recognize myself. Oh my goodness. He helps me. He helps me understand that it's in our deepest darkness, in our hardest moments. It's actually at that moment that the most beautiful, the most marvelous part of our life plan, our Father's plan for us, will be revealed to us. And so it's clear that He guides me. He leads me to Jesus in the Eucharist. He led me and showed me precisely this place. It's my oasis, because here we have Jesus all the time.
Carlo, he keeps us busy in so many ways. Some days we get a phone call and we might have to go across the country on a train to visit someone with a stroke in hospital, and talk and pray to them and bring the relic of Carlo with us.
The main thing that we try to do is to talk to the homeless people on the street, just offer them some hope if we can.
Michael, what do you have in your bag? The action of giving, the scarf and the cup of soup, it's the first step. The real action is to look them in their eyes and say, we're the same. We're both brothers and sisters in Christ. Sometimes maybe some friends are a bit afraid or think, oh no, I can't talk to this person. But we get to sit down with someone on the street and we ask them, what's your story? And often their story isn't very different than ours.
Just one day I was sitting at the computer. It was like a blinding thought that came into my head, and it just said, you need to be a priest. And I was just starstruck. I thought, no, I don't. This is crazy, go away. And my vocation, what Carlo did and what he was the same as what John the Baptist was. He prepared me in that way, that the John the Baptist prepared everyone for Jesus. This is my life now. I'm now in seminary. I'm in Rome. I can't believe it. I'm in a seminary with 12 other people, 12 other guys that I didn't know before this, but the happiness that Christ gives you and what we experience in that happiness, what Carlo talked about, that happiness, is beyond anything that you could possibly imagine. It's true happiness. And it doesn't go away, it lasts.